Yes, so basically what you're asking here is the difference between mental suffering and pain.
Yes.
Now, there is a certain amount of pain is endemic to human life. There's physical pain and mental pain. And that's unavoidable, but the mental pain becomes mental suffering when we relate that pain to the small self-image that we've created.
Yeah.
And when we cling to that pain and worry about it, basically. And for instance, I'll give you an example. Say your mother dies. Now, if your mother dies, naturally that's a painful event, and you'd expect to have grief and expect to feel pain. But if you cling to that event, it becomes self-pity. And what happens then is you start to relate these feelings of pain to this self-image that you've actually created, so this illusory self. And you start to say things to yourself like, oh, I wish it hadn't happened, oh dear, I'll never see her again, oh dear, oh dear. And this can actually build and build, and the more stories you tell yourself about it, the worse it gets. Now, all of this mental suffering that's due to relating external occurrences to this illusory separate self can be negated by realizing that there is no separate self. We are actually just, in essence, this pure awareness.
Okay.
So that's, and we can get on to physical pain later, because actually, although physical pain is endemic to human life, it is possible to use techniques that are to do with becoming aware of awareness to actually negate the physical pain. And in fact, you can use awareness of awareness techniques, and when you become deeply identified with awareness itself, to actually almost completely remove physical pain, which is pretty amazing.
Okay, so this leads us on to the next question, because in certain cultures or from certain perspectives, there is this notion or this idea that suffering is necessary, that suffering has its positives, right?
Yeah.
And so where does your understanding stand in that, or how do you see suffering? So basically, does it have a purpose? Is there any benefit to it?
Well, as long as you are misidentified as a separate self, then suffering can be a means to take you to make you investigate the nature of reality itself. It can be a spur, as long as you're living a perfectly happy-go-lucky life, everything's fine, you've got no suffering, then even if I'm misidentified, you're not going to know you're misidentified. You're just going to carry on carefree as ever and quite happy.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, deep suffering makes them to really start questioning the meaning and the value and the purpose of life. And these questions can bring you to the point at which the investigation starts and finally the awakening occurs. So suffering can be very useful. And the other thing about suffering is that even when you've awoken and you realise that you're actually just pure, an essence, you're an expression and actually an instrument of pure awareness itself.
Yeah. Suffering
can be used as a cue that you've misidentified, because once you identify it as in pure awareness itself, then basically there is no mental suffering. And as soon as any mental suffering, I'm not talking about pain here, I'm talking about mental suffering.
Yeah.
As soon as any mental suffering occurs, I mean, as soon as you start worrying about the future, for instance, worry about the future is always misidentification, because consciousness, awareness itself, has no problem with the future, has no problem with anything. Everything comes and goes within that.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing for you ever to worry about with regard to the future. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't plan for the future, obviously. We need to plan, but it's worry. That's misidentification. And worry causes mental suffering, whereas planning doesn't. You're planning a trip. That's fine. I enjoy planning something. No problem. Planning's fine, but worrying about it. So you make the plan. Then you start worrying about, what happens if this then, and then you start spinning over the plan. That's mental suffering.
Right.
But the planning itself, there's no problem. That's fine.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So suffering in that respect should be used as a key that you are then again misidentifying, and it should bring you back into awareness of awareness. So basically, if a mental suffering occurs, you can look at the suffering and say, oh, hang on, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Because you can always feel mental suffering. I mean, it's quite clear when it's occurring.
Yeah.
And you can look at that and say, hang on a minute, am I the suffering?
Yeah.
Or am I that which is aware of the suffering? And the awareness itself never suffers. It's just the ground in which the suffering comes and goes, but it itself is totally unaffected by the suffering.
Okay, so would you say then that suffering should be avoided?
Oh no, I'm not saying you should avoid it. I don't think
actively avoid.
Yeah, no,
suffering.
I don't try to actively avoid anything. I just try to live spontaneously, enjoying life.
Yeah.
But I don't try to avoid pain either. I mean, obviously I don't go around trying to break my leg or anything, you know. But
it'd be funny if you did.
Yeah, it'd be ridiculous. That's right. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that suffering, when suffering occurs, then it's actually a good wake-up call to the fact you're misidentifying. So, and this is an interesting use of the term vigilance. A lot of spiritual paths say you have to be vigilant. In Buddhism, there's a mindfulness practice where you spend all your time trying to remain mindful of your thoughts and sensations. But if you do that, then that's a form of vigilance, because you're just trying to view them as things that come and go without actually engaging with them in any way. It takes you a step back from existence, and actually you're not experiencing the full juice of existence. You don't get the full juice of it. You're just a step back as a witness. Whereas with this identifying with and as an expression, an instrument of awareness, you can actually completely embrace life and get everything out of it, and at the same time negate mental suffering by realizing that suffering, I'm not talking about pain again, I'm talking about suffering, is a key that you've misidentified, and that is what brings you back to re-identification with awareness itself. So suffering is actually a positive thing in this framework.
In that mode. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's suffering conceptualized as a mental state. Right. What if we broaden the definition of suffering a little bit, and let's say conceptualize it as, the daily challenges, the everyday today, dramas of life, the suffering we go through, the struggles, right?
Well, you see, struggles, I mean, the drama of day-to-day life needn't produce mental suffering.
Right.
Because it depends entirely on the way you look at it. I mean, your life can be full of challenges, but challenges needn't produce suffering. Challenges, we have got the most amazing onboard computer called the human mind.
Yes.
Now, this computer works brilliantly, provided that it's not overloaded with programmings that are running in the background. And the misidentification as a small self immediately fills it with lots of programs running to do with self-interest, self-preservation, self-aggrandizement. These programs run and they run and they run, and they take a lot of that computer space, that mind space. So once you can actually end all those programs by actually not identifying as a small self, immediately the mind becomes much more able to solve problems, it's much more alert, it doesn't spin, it's just much more ready for things that occur. And actually that makes life a lot easier. So a lot of the mental challenges and the physical challenges that occur on a day-to-day basis, you can handle them much more easily when you're awake, because your mind is not overloaded with a load of,
all the stuff, all the unnecessary
noise.
The
unnecessary, that's right, the unnecessary noise. That's a good way of putting it.
Okay.
So, and I mean, my life is full of mental challenges, as you know. And I enjoy them, actually. And so,
which fascinates me, because on the one hand, right, you are a paradox. He is a paradox, sitting here. Because on the one hand, you have this ability to rise above all these struggles and build around yourself a life, of peace. and, you know, joy and very minimal suffering. But on the other hand, you enjoy the challenges. You enjoy the struggle.
That's the thing. You've just put your finger on the actual nub of the matter. I enjoy them. They give me joy as well.
Yes, so there is no suffering.
No.
Wow.
No. Because if you have a challenge that comes up and you can solve it,
yes,
it's that you get a great deal of satisfaction out of that.
Yes.
So if you live a life with no challenges whatsoever, for instance, just sitting in a vegetative, meditative state and zoning out, you might get a lot of peace in that, but you're not going to get a lot of satisfaction. You're going to get peace. Well, fine, good luck if you want to just spend your whole life in peace.
Yes.
Whereas with this approach, you actually have peace as a permanent background to which you can repair whenever you wish.
Right.
It's just an underlying ground of existence. This peace, this equanimity, this serenity. It's beautiful, but you don't actually have to wallow in it all the time. You can return to it whenever you like. Right. And in the meantime, as you go through the challenges of life, they give you joy.
Okay, all right. And so, where do you place the challenges of life then? Are they necessary? Do you see them as necessary, or do you think they are avoidable, or where do you sit with them?
Yeah, I don't really think about them in that way at all. I mean, they just come and they go, and you deal with them as they come and they go.
Is the fact that I'm asking that question tell you that I am misidentifying, would you say?
Slightly, yeah. Yes, that's right, because you're kind of regarding yourself as this separate being that has to overcome all these challenges.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Whereas for me, they come and they go. When they come, I deal with them, because, and when you get down to the nitty-gritty of everything, when you get down to pure consciousness of itself, nothing matters. At all, nothing.
Wouldn't you say that's a little bit nihilistic?
Well, no, it isn't actually, because although nothing matters, everything is actually an expression of consciousness itself. Right. Everything. There is no separation. Separation. Everything is an expression of consciousness. So, although nothing matters, you could then say everything matters.
So it's a paradox.
It is. It's a paradox.
Yes.
I mean, this is another thing going back to this thing about grief and mental suffering.
Yes.
Now, when somebody dies, for most people, they leave a hole in their life. You've lost that person. There's a big hole, and you understand that. However, once you fully get to see that everything is an expression of consciousness and there is no separation, then there is never a hole in that, because it doesn't matter. Things come and go within that quite naturally, but everything is still that. Everything is still an expression of that. There is no separation. So whatever comes and goes, although it might leave a temporary hole, it doesn't leave a permanent hole, because you're still surrounded by it. Right. You're in that all the time. Right. You're never separate from that.
Okay, so would you agree then with, say, Eckhart Tolle's position on suffering, that it is basically a time thing? It's being attached to either the past or the future.
You could say that, yes, because, I mean, everything in existence, every phenomenon of existence is a time thing.
Yes.
They come and go in time, everything comes and goes.
Yeah.
And if when you wallow in self-pity, that is actually basically relating to the past, what has gone, and then projecting into the future what will not be. So you're not here in the present moment. Yeah. So that's related to time too, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you would agree with Eckhart Tolle on that?
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with him. That's not my main the main ground of the way I look at things. But I would agree with him on that. Yeah. I mean, I fully agree with him that you can only actually live in the present moment. Yes. That's all you can actually do, and that's all we ever actually have. Yeah. And my whole approach is to investigate this present moment of experience. That's all it's about, investigating the moment. So it's based on the present moment. My whole approach is based on the present moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, just to wrap up now, because we want to keep these little clips short and consumable. So, coming back to Eckhart Tolle, and I think he, in his book, The Power of Now, he conceptualized suffering as this almost self-aware, conscious beast that comes to life or is created by the suffering and the pain we go through when we are unconscious. And when we stay unconscious, this beast takes over and almost drives us, if you will. How do you conceptualize that? How do you see that? Do you think that is an adequate description or conceptualization of it, or is it a matter of opinion?
I think it's a very good description of it, because while you're not awake, while you're asleep, the suffering occurs, and you follow the suffering and build the suffering by relating it continually to this non-existent self. And in a way, as long as you're unconscious, he called it unconscious, that is the same as being misidentified.
Yes.
Same thing. As long as you're unconscious, there's actually no way out of this suffering.
Right.
So awakening is the answer. Awakening to the power of now, or to being in the now as part of the totality of being, is the answer to that. And while you're not, then there is actually no way out of the suffering.
Right. And what would you say, sorry, I said one last question, but I think I have a couple more.
Yeah, that's right.
What would you say to, for example, a Muslim who believes that suffering is a necessary aspect of life, for with it we are able to grow? Right? It teaches us resilience, it teaches us strength, it teaches us certain characteristics which are, vital to our spiritual growth. What would you say to that? Would you say that's necessary, or would you say, no, you don't need to suffer? You can still grow spiritually without the suffering. What's your take on that?
I mean, I can see that. I can see why people would say that. But if you were a Muslim that prays to Allah 5 times a day, and you fully understand the meaning of the word Islam, which means submission, and you are totally submitted to the will of the divine, then you see everything as just that will at work. And while you do that, then suffering is not mental suffering. It's just part of the hardships of life. And you are, I mean, I'm sure Muslims actually do see themselves as instruments in a way of Allah. In a way, yes. So you are just doing Allah's will, and you are doing the best you can. So the mental suffering, once again, comes in that situation. The mental suffering comes about by saying, "Oh, I wish this wasn't the case," which means you're actually going against
what your opinion.
That's right. I wish things were different. I wish I didn't have to do that. Once you start doing that, A, you're relating what's happening to an individual separate self, and B, you're actually going against the ethos of your religion. Right.
Brilliant answer. Give me 5. I love it. All right. And so this is the final question, I promise. In consideration of what's happening around the world right now, there's a lot, obviously, a lot of suffering and a lot of dramas going on. What would your message be to our viewers?
Well, there's a couple of, I mean, this is quite a complex question, but the way to overcome personal suffering is to wake up, and the way to help other people that you know to overcome their personal suffering, I'm not talking about physical hardship here, I'm only talking about personal mental suffering, is to help them wake up. So the more people that awaken to the essence of that which we are, the less suffering there will be on the planet. And the more of us that awaken and help others to awaken, that will decrease the amount of suffering on the planet. So from my point of view has always been to stay awake and point others to awakening, and to enjoy, because joy is the opposite of suffering. To enjoy life as much as possible, and facilitate others to enjoy life as much as possible, to actually spread as much joy in the world as you can. Because this negates suffering. When it comes to unavoidable suffering due to what other people are doing to you, for instance, you can lessen this by your own approach to it. Obviously, some of this is unavoidable, and all we can do in that respect, really, I mean, is you can help other people by giving to charities and whatever. You can do that, and obviously that's a valuable thing to do. But up to a point. I mean, so what's happening to, say, the women in Afghanistan? There's very little I can do about that. I can empathise with them, of course, I do.
Yeah.
I think it's awful. And you can give to charities to help them, and if you, but there's not much else you can actually do about that. So for me, the main thrust of really reducing suffering on the planet is to stay awake and help others awakening, and this will slowly spread throughout the planet.
Okay.
Even environmental problems.
Yeah.
Once you wake up, then you become a lot less greedy, a lot less lustful, all of these negative things that have produced over-exploitation of the planet, overpopulation, whatever. Most of the problems of the planet are overcome naturally when you awaken, because you'll know it changes your whole way you look at life. Actually.
Fantastic. Yeah. And just to clarify, by awakening you mean by realizing the real
essence of being.
The essence of
being. By actually
yeah.
realizing your true identity as an expression, an instrument of consciousness itself, rather than a separate individual being. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Wow. Once again,
Simple.
brilliant conversation as always. It's been amazing. I can't wait to have more of these talks. Anytime. You'll be seeing more of Colin Drake in this show, and thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your time.
Very welcome.
Thank you. All right, thank you guys for tuning in.
Time for talisman.
And we'll see you next time.